Okay, this is Unit 7, Lesson 6, vocabulary review. A proportion is an equation stating that two blanks are equal. Who has the answer to that? Sergio. We had another name for that. Maya? Ratios, very good. Two ratios are equal. Okay, but we often treat ratios the same as we do fractions, right? Okay, so let's just clarify that. All right, solve each proportion. Now, there's a way to mentally solve this. And if you mentally solve this, take a look at my whiteboard over here. I show you how to mentally solve that. But really what I want you guys to use, if you can't mentally solve a problem, I want you to use cross-product property. But who can share with me their answer for number 2? Nikita?
I got
8. And what did you use? Did you use the mental method or use a cross-product property?
I used mental.
Okay, and what did you do when you used mental math?
I did, because I know that 32 divided by 8 equals 4.
Right, 32 divided by 8 equals 4. So how do you find out n?
So I do either numerator by whatever you either multiply by the denominator by.
Okay.
So I do 8 divided by 1 is
So 8 divided by 8 would equal 1, or 1 times 8 equals 8, so n equals 8. So the answer is n equals 8, but if you didn't use the mental method, you can solve this using cross-product property, which says that two proportions that are equal, if you multiply the numerator to the denominator, the first cross, and then that is going to be equal to the numerator to the denominator, and that gives us the equation. 32 equals 4n. How do we isolate the n away from the 4? Class? What does that mean? What are we doing when we do that? That's what we're doing, but when we put a 4 underneath, what's happening? What operation is it? Add, subtract, multiply, divide. Thank you, Leo. It's divide. So we're going to divide both sides by 4. Okay? And what happens when I divide 4 by 4 here? It comes back and it gives me 1. And then 32 divided by 4 gives you back 8. So 8 equals 1n. And then anything times 1 is just going to be itself. That's how we get 8 equals n. Okay? So it's just some review of some solving equations. All right? Next problem. Who's got the next problem? Anea, all the way in the back. Okay, and what'd you get back? Okay, so when you cross 6 and 5, you multiply that and get 30. Okay, what else? N times 2 gives you what? 2n, very good. And what's the equation going to be? So 2n equals 30, okay? That's my equation. All right, now how do I solve this equation? Divide by what? We divide 2 by to both sides by 2, right? And then 30 divided by 2 gives me back what? 15. And then 2 divided by 2 gives me back what? 1. So we get 1n equals 15. And then what happens to the 1? It goes away because n times 1 is just n, so n equals 15. So these first two are pretty easy. Who has the next one? This one wasn't so easy. You might have tried to use mental math for 2 and 3, but 4 might not have been as easy, right? Because you get a decimal number back. Who got this one? Isaiah, you want to give a shot? Well, let's walk me through the steps. Cross product. What's my first cross product going to be? Right, so 8 times n gives me 8n. And what's the other cross product? 7 times 100, what does that give me back? Very good, 700. And so I get an equation out of that. What's my equation going to be? Well, this has to be equal to this, so this is my equation. Now I got to solve it, and I think you're getting to the next step, which is how do we solve this equation? Divide. We're going to divide by what? If I divide it by 10, that doesn't get my variable by itself. If I divide by 8, that will get rid of the 8 in front of the n, right? And so 8 divided by 8 becomes what? 8 divided by 8 is 8? It's 1, okay. And now we have to take 700 divided by 8. What did you get when you took 700 divided by 8? 87.5. I have 1 n equals 87.5, and then anything times 1 is just itself, so n equals 87 and 5/10. Okay? Any questions? We're good. Easy. This is easy stuff. I've gone over cross product with you guys like 4 or 5 times this year. Okay, now we're going to see how we're going to use this to solve percentages. Okay, quick show of hands. How many left-handed people are there in the class? Who writes with their left-handed in here? Anybody? Nobody in here, right? You write with your left hand? Okay, 1 person. And then how many people do we have in the class? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. 17 students, right? Okay, so out of 17 students, we have 1 student that writes with his left hand. Now let's read this information. We're going to see how this connects. We're going to make some connections here. What you learn: to use proportions to solve problems involving percent. Why learn this? Okay, survey and poll results are often reported using percents. So I just took a survey, right? I asked who writes with their left hand. And out of 17 students, we had 1 student wrote with their left hand, right? Okay. Well, they did the same thing in this example. They surveyed 2,000 people in the United States, and 204 people said they are left-handed. You can use this information to find the percent of people who are left-handed. So take a look at this model. This is what's in the textbook, and it gives us a bar graph, right? So this bar is tilted sideways all the way, is 100%, part way up. We don't know what that percentage is. Here's the part, 204. If it was all the way over here, it'd be at 100%, it'd be 2,000. So this is part of the whole. Now, if you take a look, we can set up a proportion. So this is really fits well with our warm-up. So do you see that we have 204 out of 2,000, right? And we don't know what percent 204 is out of 2,000. So we put n in the numerator, and we're trying to figure out that percent. And what's percent mean? Do you guys remember what percent means? Per 100 or over 100. So what we don't know, the percent we don't know, per 100. Okay? So it's just like the warm-up. Can you guys solve this? Solve this to figure out what the percentage of people are left-handed. And let's see if we're really close to what we have for our class survey. Now you could use mental math to solve this, or you can use the cross product property. Does anybody have an answer? You might be able to mentally solve this, but I still need to know your explanation. How'd you get your answer? So let me take you through this process. Cross product. What's the first cross product going to be? There's 2 of them, cross products, plural. What's the first cross product? Lauren? Yep, 204 times 100. Now there's a trick. Remember when we multiply by 100? We're moving the decimal how many places? 2, because we have 2 zeros. And which way are we going to move it? We're making it bigger, right? So which way are we going to move the decimal to make it a larger number? To the right. I could see you're pointing to the right. Yep. We move it to the right. And so take a look. So if I move this from 204 over to the right 2 places, it gives me 20,400. Okay? So I'm trying to get you guys to remember that trick. We covered that in the first quarter. when we multiply by a power of 10, we can move the decimal how many zeros we have. Okay? Now, the other cross product, that's the easy one. What's the other cross product going to be? Who can tell me that one? I thought I heard it. Who said it? Go ahead. 2,000 what? 2,000 n, very good. So I have 2,000 n. Okay, now we have our equation. And so 2,000 n equals 20,400. To isolate my variable, I'm going to divide both sides by 2,000. And what happens to my 2,000 on this side? What happens to that? They cancel each other out, right? And they go away. It becomes a 1. And then I'm not going to do the long division, but I'm going to tell you right now, if you divide this out, if you're on the numerator, you're in the house. If you're in the denominator, you're in the bottom of the house. This is what you end up with. And then 1 times n is just n. N equals 10 and 2/10. Okay? So, out of 2,000 people, a little bit more than 10% of them are left-handed. So, we have a class of 17. What would 10% of 17 be? Move your decimal one place. What's 10% of 17? If we're dividing by 10, we're moving it to make it smaller. How many places? I was about to see somebody, one place, right? So make 17, divide that by 10 by moving the decimal to the left. What's it going to be? 1 and 7/10. So about 1 and 7/10 should be left-handed in this class. So more than 1, less than 2. How many people do we have that are left-handed in this class? 1. Do you see how we use percents to kind of predict how many people we'd have that are left-handed? So if we know how many people are in the school, we can predict using these percentages how many people are left-handed in the whole school. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's go ahead and do this next problem. This is for you guys to work out. This is my example. You're trying to figure out what percent of 92 is 23. What percent of 92 is 23? So the setup is very similar to what we just did. We're trying to figure out, we got 92 total, and then 23 of the 92, what is that percentage? So the setup, it's the same problem. So you're setting up exactly the same. We're going to use the same strategy to solve for the percentage. Okay, who can walk me through this? What's the setup going to be? Somebody. Ms. Ford, can you take a guess? 23 over 9. Yes, we have 23 over 9. And they're saying what percent? Well, percent is per 100 or over 100, right? And they're saying what, so that's my variable. So n over 100, what percent of 23 is 92? Do you guys see how we're setting that up? Okay, now what's the next step? What is our next step here?
Then you have to cross multiply
Cross multiply, and what's your first cross product going to be?
23 times 100.
And what do you get back when you multiply 23 times 100?
230.
Okay, and if you look, 23, if I move the decimal to the right, I have to add zeros so I can move it 2 places. Now, what's the other cross product going to be?
N times 92.
N times 92, and what's that going to be?
92n.
92n. So from that, we have this equation. Okay, and how do I isolate my variable? How do I get my variable by itself? What do I have to undo?
The 2,300.
Well, is there a variable on this side?
Oh, so you have to undo it.
I got to undo the multiply by 92. So what do I do to undo multiply by 92?
You can take away the few.
Can you help her out?
You have to divide by 92.
I have to divide by 92 to get rid of multiply by 92. Okay? And so when I divide this out, what does that become? What does that become now? Because becomes 1n. And then did you get 23 divided by 92? What'd you get?
4.
4, it's not 4. 2300 divided by 92 is actually 25. Now, if you simplified this fraction over here would be 1/4. That's 1/4, right? And 1/4 equals something over 100. What's a fourth of 100?
25.
25, okay? So n equals 25. 23 is 25% of 92. Okay, we good? All right, moving along. Now, sometimes if you get the proportion, you can make things a little bit easy on yourself by simplifying one of the fractions or both of the fractions. So do you see that 20 over 100? Can I simplify that fraction? Do you see that 20 over 100 is the same as 1/5? Okay. And then you can use your mental math that we used in the warm-up, right? So let's take a look. Here's the same fraction. What is the factor that takes me from 5 to 55? What can I multiply to 5 to give me 55 back? Somebody I haven't heard from yet. Samantha, go ahead.
5 times 11.
Yep. So if I multiply the bottom, 5 times 11, I get 55. What's 1 times 11? 11. So guess what n is going to be? What is n? 11. So 11 is 20% of 55. So sometimes you can use shortcuts. Sometimes it's better to use the cross product property. Okay? And so this is a shortcut we talked about earlier when we had equivalent ratios and how to write equivalent ratios or equivalent fractions. Okay, so moving along, here's what I need you to do. Read this question. I already simplified the fraction. I need you to solve it. But here's the problem. Suppose your entertainment budget is 30% of your weekly wages from a job. You plan to spend $10.50 on movie night. How much will you need to earn at your job in order to stay within your budget? So you set a goal for yourself. You're not going to spend more than 10% of what you make on entertainment, stuff for fun. So we're trying to figure out how much do you need to make if you're going to go to the movies and spend $10.50 so that you don't spend more than 10%. So here's the problem. I already set it up for you. If you notice, do you see the strategy over here? 30 over 100. Do you see what I did to simplify that fraction? 30 and 100, both of those can be divided by 10. 30 divided by 10 is 3. 100 divided by 10 is 10. Okay, now it's just cross product property. Can you guys quickly solve that? This one would be tough to figure out mentally. But you could do it. But for most of you, I'd probably recommend going with cross-product property. And I will give you a big hint. You get back a whole number. Are you done? Well, try to walk me through some of the steps. What's the first thing we need to do? Here's my equation. What's the first thing I got to do? Multiply. What am I multiplying? Yep, 3 times n. We call that the cross product because I'm going from numerator to denominator. So and there's 2 of them. The first cross product is 3 times n. What's 3 times n? 3n. Very good. And then what's the other cross product going to be? 10 and 50 hundredths times 10. And remember, when we multiply by 10, we're making the number bigger, and there's 1 0 there. We're going to move our decimal how many places? 1 place. Do you know which way we're going to move it? To the right. We're making it bigger. So if I move my decimal to the right, what do I end up with? 105. Very good. Okay, so now we have this equation from our cross product. Do you understand everything so far? How do I solve for n? Divide by what? We're going to divide both sides by 3. Very good. Okay. And then what happens to 3 divided by 3? What does that become? Becomes 1. And then hopefully you can tell me, what is 105 divided by 3? Can you figure that out? It's going to be a whole number. Can you help her out, Leonardo? It's going to be 35. Very good. There we go. Any questions about that problem? Are we good? Okay. Now, almost done, home stretch. We want to know what 85% of 20 is. Now, we can always write this as a fraction. What's 85% written as a fraction? Go ahead and say it. You got it, Akpana. 85 over 100. Remember, percent means per 100, so 85 per 100. So this part we can write as a fraction. So we've got half of our proportion, right? Now we got to figure out my other ratio. Is this going to be in the numerator or the denominator? Richard, what do you think all the way back there? You think it's going to be in the top? Well, it's saying 85% of 20, right? It's not saying 20 is 85% of a number. Does that make sense? So you have to be careful about that. 20 is going to be in the denominator because we're saying, hey, we want 85% of 20. They're not saying 20 is 85% of a number. So that'd be a different problem. Okay? Now it's just like what we did before. Cross product property. This one's easy. You guys know that one. Can somebody tell me what 85 times 20 is? Sergio. 1,700. Okay. And now we have the equation. Here's our equation. And this is an easy one. I know you guys can solve this now. Can you guys solve this? It's super easy. What do I do to isolate my variable? Melvin, what am I going to do to isolate my variable here? See where my n is? How do I get n by itself? Can somebody help Melvin out? Lauren?
You divided by 1,700.
Is that where my variable is?
What? You divided by 100?
I got to look at where my variable is, and what's with my variable? It's 100, and it's 100 times n, so I got to get rid of 100 times by dividing by 100. Okay? What happens to 100 divided by 100? Becomes 1n. And what's 1,700 divided by 100? Guess what? If we multiply and we move it to the right 2 zeros, the number zeros, when we divide, we're making it smaller. So which way am I going to move my decimal to make it smaller? To the left. So if my decimal is right here, where does it end up? In the middle between the 0 and the 7, right? So 17.00, or it's just 17. Okay, we good? And then 17 equals n. So 17 is 85% of 20. Do you guys understand what we just did? Anybody have a question? Okay, moving along, almost to the end. Your math teacher assigns 25 problems for homework. You have done 60% of them. How many problems have you done? Well, we already know we could take 60% and write that as a fraction, right? Okay. Now, what is my other ratio going to be? Because I got to make a proportion. I have to make an equation with two ratios. One of my ratios is going to be 60 over 100, 60%. What's my other ratio going to look like? Trinity. What is it? N over 25. Very good. We don't know. We know that we did 60% of the problems. We don't know what it is. We're going to figure it out. So it's n over 25. 25 is all of the problems all together. Okay, and then 60%, 60 per 100. Okay. This cross product right here is super easy. What's this first cross product going to be? 100 times n, right? And then can you guys get the other cross product for me? Can somebody get that and then tell me what that is? Audrey, can you tell me what the other cross product is when you're finished? Very good. If you got 1,500, you're correct. Now we're one step closer to solving our problem. We set up our equation from our cross products. How do I get, and this is really easy because we're just doing what to get my n by itself? Somebody tell me, anybody?
We're isolating the n.
We're going to isolate the n. How do I isolate the n?
You divide 100 by itself.
We're going to divide both sides by 100, okay? And then the 100 divided by 100 becomes a 1. And then 1,500 divided by 100 is just going to be 15. So n equals 15. You have completed 15 out of 25 problems. Okay, so here's the key concept for today. This is just to wrap up the lesson. These are the 3 problems that you need to set up with proportions. So do you guys see right here, when we're trying to find out what percent of 25 is 5, what percent? What? Do you see how n is the numerator? Percent. So that 100 is not going to change. It's percent's always going to be, per 100 is going to be there. But here they're saying what percent? What? I don't know, n percent. Of 25 is 5. So they're trying to say, hey, out of 25, what is the percentage that 5 is going to be? Do you guys see how we set up that problem? And then it's just cross product property to solve for n, right? So this is the first type of problem we saw today. If you look at this other problem over here, finding a part. So what is 20% of 25? So if we know the whole and we're trying to find 20% of it, 20%, that's easy to write as a ratio, 20%, 25, n is in the numerator. We did a problem like that. Do you guys understand how that's a little different? We're trying to find what is the percent, what is 20% of the whole going to be, or 20% of 25. Do you guys understand that problem? Okay, and then here again, finding the whole. 20% of what? 20% of something is 5. They're saying, hey, this is the part of the whole. Okay, we're trying to find what is the whole. Well, 5 is 20% of whatever the whole is. So 20%, 5 is in the numerator. We don't know what the whole is. Okay, so we have these 3 different percents and proportions. These are the 3 type of problems we're trying to learn how to work with today. Any questions about these 3 different problems? Solving it to me is the easy part. Learning which is the setup we're trying to use is the more challenging part. Okay, so the last slide. Here's what I want you to do. What percent of 200 is 50? Can I get a volunteer for that one? And I'm going to give you some time. I want to assign 1 to each person. So who wants to do this first problem? Can I get a volunteer? And then I'd like a volunteer for these other 4. Let's see. Jabari, could you do this one right here? 50% of what number is 8? And could I get somebody to do this one right here? What percent of 200 is 50? Richard, can you do that one? Okay. And then 12 is 80% of what? Could I get somebody to try that one? Isaiah, do you mind trying to do 12 of 80 is what percent? Or 12 is 80% of what? Okay, can you try to figure that one out? And then this last one, can I get a volunteer for this last one? No volunteer. Leonardo, could you try this last one? What is 30% of 90? Give that one a try. Okay, everybody else, just try to work through these. Pick one out to try to work out. We're running a little short on time, so I'm trying to pick up the pace a little bit. So can somebody, who has this problem right here? Who did I give the first problem to? Richard, what's the proportion that you set up? It's 50 over 200, right? And then that's going to be equal to what? It's going to be equal to 1/4 or 25%. Very good. Okay. Or you would have put n over 100 because what percent? We don't know what percent. So the numerator would be n percent per 100. I'm going to show you some detailed answers here in a little bit. So 1/4, which is also 25%. Okay, who has this one? 12 is 80% of what? Who's got this one? Isaiah, what'd you get? You got 15. Okay, and is that the percent, the part, or the whole? Well, 12 would be the part. Okay, they're saying 12 is 80% of what we're looking for, which is the whole. 12 is part of the whole, and it's 80% of the whole. Do you understand? But you are correct, it is 15, but I just want you to understand why it's the whole. Okay. Who did I give this to? Jabari? Who did I give this one to? It was 50% of what number is 8? 50% of what number is 8? I can reword this, but let me see, get you to take a guess. Well, first of all, what's 50%? Right. They're saying 8 is half of something. What is the something? So if we had to split something and I gave you 8, what did we have together? Right. Do you see a lot of this is a comprehension issue? Do you understand what it's asking you? Do you understand? Because I know if I explain it to you, you can piece it together. But I'm trying to get you guys to understand what the question's asking. So 16 is the whole. Both our halves together is 16. Okay? And then this last one, what is 30% of 90? Who did I give that one to? Uh-huh. That one's a tough one. 30% would be 27 is 30% of 90. Let me show you how you get the answer. So this is what I did. I set these up. So 30%, take a look. It's 30 over 100. And we don't know what part of 90 that is, so it's n over 90. Do you see how I set that up? Okay, then it's just cross product and we get to 27. Okay, but I do want to get back to this part over here. Is we need to match these up. This is kind of the setup. What is 40% of 15? Which of these proportions does that match to? Who's got that one? Which one does this match to? Which proportion? First, second, or third? Trinity? The third, you're correct. And then 15 is what percent of 40? Who's got that one? Which one does that match to? Can I get a volunteer for that one? We've already eliminated one. What can it be? Upon I could see you trying to think through this, what do you think it is? So percent of 40. 15 is what percent of 40, right? So 15 out of 40. So I'd write that how? Out of 40, there's 15, right? So that my first fraction would be 15 over 40, right? But it says what percent. We don't know what percent. So it would have to be n over 100, because what percent is over 100, right? What percent? So 15 out of 40 over what percent per 100, okay? And then that leaves us with this last one, which is 40%, which they already give 40% of what number is 15. So 15 is 40% of something number we don't know, okay? Any questions about the lesson? Are we good?